Welcome to Being at Home with George. Really excited to be here today and to talk about this idea of creating the possibility of embracing whatever comes up and at the same time generating the hope. This is a time of year where people going back to school and learning is very important. And when I talk to people, they have this idea that things should happen quickly, that should be a quick fix so you could take a magic bullet or a technique or there's an easier, softer way. And even with myself, my salesman back in May said that I should order my car. So by the time my lease expired, I would have it. And so I called him the other day and my car is still in production and they don't know when I'm going to get it. And he suggested that he had a car that I could get now, and it wasn't the color I wanted. It was white. And my first impression was, no, I don't want a white car. But then I started thinking about it and said, well, how long is it going to be before my car comes in? And he says, it's uncertain. And so I said, okay, I went in and I ended up buying the car. And after I bought the car, I talked to the general manager, and he said he may not get a car for 6 months. So it's this idea of, wow, I wanted a quick fix. I wanted to say, oh, your car will come at such and such a time and you'll have it. Things aren't working that way. And so I started thinking about it and reflecting on it. And each time I buy a car, it seems like I have to spend time just trying to figure out how everything works because everything's in different places and it's touchscreen and whatnot. And I realized when I was reflecting on it that all those cars I had over the years, I just used the basic knowledge of how to turn the car on, how to use certain things like the radio, the TV, and you get instructions for driving. And I realized that I really never committed myself to sitting down, even though they spent an hour going through it, and really understanding how that car works, how to use all of the bells and whistles. And some of us would say, well, maybe we don't need all of those. Well, I started reflecting on that and I realized that we do that with ourselves, that we really don't know how we work. We don't use 10% of our capacity, but we don't have instructions or we don't use the instructions we could have or how to get the most out of our own vehicle, this body, mind, and heart and spirit. So I made a commitment to actually understand this new vehicle and understand how to use things. Now, that's not the only thing. I could talk about phones. I could talk about if you have to move and you get involved with something, if you buy a new TV, you have to use your mobile device to connect with it. And so things are changing and they're constantly changing. And so for me, what it comes back to is this idea of we have to pay the price. We have to take the time. I have to invest in understanding how my car works, understanding how I work. I believe we've been doing that in these sessions. And a lot of the teaching that I've been engaged in is teaching us that we have this amazing masterpiece. We have this amazing equipment, that these amazing birth gifts that we have not even fathomed. We have not spent the time to really think about how to use them in a way that generates that hope and optimism and faith, but also quality of life where we actually have access to that masterpiece and we're having more moments of joy, peace, and compassion. And so I remember, must have been maybe 4 years ago or so, I was working with this volleyball team and I was trying to help them to understand how to access the masterpiece. And it seemed to me that they wanted something quicker. They just wanted one thing. They wanted a softer, easier way. And then in my back and forth with them, I said, no struggle, no swag. But some of you don't know what swag is. That means swag is not just like good stuff that you get. Swag is about having this supreme confidence. And you can see it in the way the person walks or the way that they approach things. I think of Michael Jordan, when he played for the Bulls, he'd be walking onto the court and he just had that swag. And I think we want that swag without paying for it, without putting in the effort, without going through the struggle for it. And so I said that to them, and it's the same with myself. People will say, oh, you're so accomplished, you're so this, you're so that. And it's the struggle that leads to that. It's by embracing the struggle and generating the hope in the midst of that struggle and saying, okay, how do I relate to this in a way where I'm learning and I'm growing and I'm continuing to transform? And so the reality is, if I don't take time for my vehicle, I may not be taking time for myself, and myself is more important than the vehicles. If the vehicle is going to get old, it's going to become obsolete. And of course, if I don't adapt and adjust, I'm going to be obsolete or I'm going to become extinct. And so I feel like this is an opportunity for us to really understand, how do we do this thing called life? How do we relate to the situation with all the turmoil, the complexities, and stop thinking that somebody can fix us, or that there's a boilerplate or a bumper sticker saying that's going to change or transform us, or we're going to take a course or read a book or have an engagement or even have a coach or someone, a facilitator that's facilitating something for us, and think that we're going to get everything at once. I like to quote Earl Nightingale when he talks about the only people that make money work for the mint. And what he meant by that is we have to earn it, and that we have free gifts, but we don't value them because they're free. And so we have this ability to be self-aware. We have this ability to self-regulate. We have this ability to generate what we call strong self-efficacy, where we develop stress hardiness. We develop this ability that says no matter what happens, we get to choose our response or our reaction to it, that we can actually cultivate this ability to create space between stimulus and response. And in that space, we have the freedom and power to choose. And so just going back to my whole process 37 years ago or so, where I learned about this, working at the stress management class, and we talked about the 3 C's. And the 3 C's were what? They were this idea that I had to be committed to my own development. So that means I had to be willing to struggle. There's no struggle, no swag, but it was a commitment. I had to do whatever I needed to do. That spiritual term, 70 times 70, that's not really a number. It's really saying do it until you can do it. And so that was my commitment, to do it until I could do it. So that's the commitment part. But the challenge part is seeing things as a challenge. And the third thing was this control, that no matter what happens to me, I can control my reaction, my response. And as a result of that, I developed stress hardiness. And we can do the same thing. So I know there's a lot of uncertainty about COVID, about a lot of things, but we have this ability to commit to our development, our transformation. We have this ability to choose our response, or if we see we're reacting, we can fix that and respond according to our values and our ideals, our aims. And this idea of seeing it as a challenge, and seeing this possibility that if you want swag, you got to struggle. And the struggle is what brings the best part of us out, if we're able to embrace whatever comes up and generate the hope. Okay, what's the lesson here? How can we relate to this in a way that empowers us? How can we just say yes to life? Yes, and we're going to use our latent abilities to get there. But we have to understand who we are. We have to know ourselves. And there may not be a manual that we have access to in one place, but we can start to do the self-discovery, the self-knowing, and these conversations. And there's a lot of books and teachings out there where we can start to understand, how does this mind-body process work? How do we get to it in a way where we can create space between stimulus and response? And if we can have core values and a worthy cause that we can relate to, then all things are possible, in the sense of we can generate a life that we want to live into, a life that's full of love, compassion, understanding, and joy.